Never let children pick your method of execution. It will be creative, maybe even a little funny, but it will also be objectively cruel and unusual. Take the Brothers Grimm version of Little Red Riding Hood, for example, called Little Red Cap. Little Red starts out all cute and sweet, but by the end, she's basically Frau Percha. I'm Liz, and this is Into the Hoods, a series where I'm breaking down different versions of Little Red Riding Hood and how it's meandered on and off the path throughout history. Today I'll share the Brothers Grimm version and then we will analyze it, but first let's share the story. Once upon a time, there was a cute little girl, beloved by all, but especially her grandmother. The old woman made her a little cap made of red velvet, and the kid liked it so much. She wore it all the damn time. So much so that her nickname became Little Red Cap. This is very indicative of kid behavior, right? For example, my little sister had a pair of red galoshes that my mom was afraid she would never take off, and eventually she would just hulk out of them. However, we did not start calling my sister Little Red Galoshes because people don't do that in real life. If we did, my name would be American Average Sized Women's Plus Stretch Blue Jeans. One day, Little Red Cap's granny fell ill, so her mother packed a basket of bread and wine. Take these supplies to your grandmother, she told her daughter. She needs sustenance. Mind your manners while you're there, and tell her I said hello. Behave yourself on the journey through the woods, too. Do not go wandering off the path, or you might spill and spoil the food and have nothing for your poor grandmother. Little Redcap promised to be good and set off for her journey, a 30-minute walk through the woods to the next village. On her way, a wolf approached Little Redcap, but she wasn't too afraid of him, for she had no way of knowing that he was a dastardly creature. Hello, Little Redcap, he said, which probably should have been her first warning sign. How did that asshole know her name? And where are you off to so early? I'm off to my grandmother's, she told him, and then he asked what was in the basket, and Little Redcap blabbed on and on. Oh, we baked yesterday because Granny isn't feeling very good, and this food will make her strong. She lives about, 15 minutes away at the house beside the three large oak trees with the hedge of hazel bushes. I have three cats, and my birthday is in April. The last bit I improvised, but the vibe I get from this version isn't so much that she's stupid as she is a kid, and kids monologue sometimes. Now, the wolf was thinking this kid looked tasty, and so he distracted her with a plan that I would probably fall for myself. It's such a beautiful day, kid, and yet you march so diligently. I think you were on your way to school. Take your time. Look at the flowers. Listen to the birds. Isn't it beautiful in the woods? I mean, he's not wrong. A Little Red wasn't being all selfish and taking her time. She thought to herself she could pick some wildflowers for her grandmother, which is something we often do for sick people, isn't it? Justice for Little Redcap. Well, of course, the wolf beat her to Granny's, ate the lady up whole, and put on her little mob cap. He waited for Little Redcap, who arrived shortly after, and the kid was getting a real bad vibe from the place, but she forged on, and after the predictable exchange of big ears, big eyes, big hands, and horribly big mouth, the wolf pounced, swallowed her whole, and took a food coma nap, snoring very, very loudly. Just then, a hunter was passing by. He was surprised by the loud snores coming out of the grandmother's house, so he decided to take a look inside. And this is one situation where his sexist assumptions did well by someone, for of course he found the wolf with a belly the size of two grown people and cut the girl and her grandmother out. And he did this somehow without waking the wolf. And Little Red shook herself off and she cried, I was so scared. It was so dark inside that wolf. Now, if you're a fan of Into the Woods, and you probably are, the next part of my story may surprise you. Little Red Cap herself comes up with the idea to fill the wolf's belly with large, heavy stones. When the wolf woke up and tried to run away, he was killed. And I can only imagine he was killed in some kind of itchy and scratchy horror situation where, like, he runs away, but the middle of his body stays behind. This is generally where the story ends, but in an earlier version of the Brothers Grimm fairy tales, they had a little sequel where another wolf follows Little Redcap to her grandmother's, but the two lure him with a sausage into a trough of boiling water where he drowns. So, how did we get here? Grimm's Little Redcap has an interesting and unusual backstory. Something you may or may not know about the Brothers Grimm is that they collected folk tales with the intention of establishing a united German culture. Europe was being ravaged by Napoleon at the time they embarked on this project, and they were reclaiming a sense of their Germanness. This was important to the Grimms. They believed that folklore was a vital part of that pursuit. So, some stories they intentionally did not put into their collection because they weren't considered German enough, especially if the tale had French influence. But that is not the case with Little Red Cap, which has a direct line from Charles Perrault's earlier French version. See, Perrault's version was so popular, it did something that very few original literary fairy tales do. And there is no doubt that Perrault's version of Little Red Riding Hood is an original literary tale. He may have taken the plot and characters from folklore, but then he presented them with names and characteristics and changed the ending, making it his own take. But his twist was so popular, it made its way back into folklore because now the main version of Little Red Story that was being circulated through the oral tradition from storyteller to storyteller was the Perrault version. A grim source for their version of Little Red Cap was the Hassenflug family. So sorry for my pronunciation. Now, that family had French ancestors, so it's unsurprising that their version lines up very closely to Perrault's. However, they do change it in several distinct ways. One, they give it a happy ending, and this may have developed in the folk tradition, the happy ending, that is. Uh, Grimm may have invented it, the Hassenflug family may have invented it, but folk tales, which are the stories we share with each other in the oral tradition, they usually have a happy ending, so it's also possible that that just developed over time. Another difference in the Grimm version is that they gave Little Redcap a distinctly childlike persona rather than portraying her as a young woman like Perrault does. This has likely many reasons behind it, but one is that the Grimms realized their collection would be a great tool to educate children, and they began ensuring their tales had a moral or didactic lesson that could be drawn from them. However, Little Red Cap, from their very first version in 1812 to their last version in 1857, was always a much younger character, so that might not be the exact reason. Another specific Grimm motif is the death by stones in the belly aspect. This motif pops up in another story that the Grimms share called The Wolf and the Seven Kids, which is extremely similar, except that the granny and the little red characters are a goat and the goat's kids. This tale is also common in Southwest Asia, so it's possible those two tales bled into each other over the years, or that the Grimms smushed them together due to their similarities, something that they were known to do. Lastly, the Grimm version introduces the idea of this hunter or huntsman as the savior, and this is a significant change for two reasons. One reason, of course, is that it takes away the earlier folk version of our little red saving herself, and it hands that role to a male authority figure. A facet of the middle class patriarchal ideal that didactic stories like this would impress upon young ladies. But choosing a huntsman in particular as the savior has another sneaky aspect that modern readers don't often associate with this tale or the character of a huntsman. And that is that the German term used for huntsman is a title that also came with some local law enforcement authority. So, in some respects, the huntsman of Little Red Cap is a cop. You can take that how you will. Next time on Into the Hoods, I'll share a story from the 11th century that some consider the first known version of Little Red Riding Hood, but that is up for debate, so you'll have to decide for yourself after hearing it. Later in the series, I'll share other stories that may or may not technically be Little Red Riding Hood tales, but could easily be mistaken for them. So I'll see you then for more Into the Hoods.
Fucked Up Fairy Tales with Liz. Fucked Up Fairy Tales with Liz.